The book of Judges has 6 cycles of hero stories. Last time we did the first one, and now we go into the second. The story is told in Judges chapter 4 in the form of narrative, and then again in Judges chapter 5 in the form of a victory poem. So here we go with the story of Deborah and Barak. When our story begins, this part of the world, West Asia, is just coming into the Iron Age, crossing over from the Bronze Age. We're not quite sure who brought the technology of iron to this part of the world, but most probably it was the sea peoples, one group among them being the Philistines, who have come over the sea in long ships, bringing with them the technology of iron. Meanwhile, Israel does not have this technology. It's going to be a great long while, well into the reign of David, before it can manage to work with this metal. So here begins our story. Again, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord now that Ehud was dead. So the Lord sold them into the hands of Jabin, king of Canaan, who reigned in Hazor. Sisera, the commander of his army, was based in Haroshet Hagoyim. Because he had 900 chariots fitted with iron and had cruelly oppressed the Israelites for 20 years, they cried to the Lord for help. Israel now has an enemy with state-of-art weaponry that they don't have. 900 chariots fitted with iron. Most probably the wheels and the rims of the wheels were fitted with iron. Now Deborah, a prophet, the wife of Lapidoth, was leading Israel at that time. She held court under the palm of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim, and the Israelites went up to her to have their disputes decided. Is Deborah going to be the new judge? This would be extremely unconventional for this time, because judges, as we know now, were military heroes, warriors who would lead their people out into battle. Is Deborah going to do that? She is introduced as someone who is doing the usual job a judge would do. She is settling cases. She holds court somewhere in the middle of the country so that both the north and the south can come up to have their cases settled. She is situated strategically, and she seems to be a very important person at this point of time. She is a prophet, and she is the wife of Lapidoth. Now, a little bit on that phrase. It's possible that Lapidoth is the name of her husband, whether dead or alive. But it's also possible that she is being described as a woman of Lapidoth. Wife and woman both have the same one word in Hebrew, and Lapidoth means flames or torches. So a woman of Lapidoth would be a woman of flame, a fiery woman. Is that how she is being described? Deborah, a female prophet, a fiery woman, leading Israel at that time. If so, she is a good candidate for a judge-deliver, except that she is female. But see how the story goes further. She sent for Barak, son of Abinoam, from Kadesh in Naphtali, and said to him, "The Lord, the God of Israel, commands you, go, take with you 10,000 men of Naphtali and Zebulun, and lead them up to Mount Tabor. I will lead Sisera, the commander of Jabin's army, with his chariots and his troops to the Kishon River, and give him into your hands." Now we understand that Deborah is only a mediator. She is a messenger from God, being the prophet that she is, conveying a message to the one whom God seems to have chosen to be Israel's judge, Barak. In fact, Barak, at this point, seems to be superior to Deborah, at least in terms of what their names mean. Deborah means a bee, and a bee, as we know, has a sting. But Barak means lightning. Lightning with a much greater destructive capacity. So perhaps it's Barak then who's going to be the judge in our story. Let's see. At least that's what we think till Barak opens his mouth. And when he does, Barak says to her, "If you go with me, I will go. But if you don't go with me, I won't go." He's saying the same thing twice over, making sure that Deborah properly understands what he is trying to say. Go with me, Deborah, and I will go with you. But if you don't go, I won't go. It doesn't sound like the kind of thing a judge, warrior, would say. Or should we read it differently? Should we understand Barak as saying he wants a woman of God to go with him? The presence of God in the form of this prophetess to go with him. Is that what he is asking? We don't know the tone of what he said, and so we cannot say. But we can look for what happens next in the story, because Deborah puts a certain spin on his words. "Certainly, I will go with you," said Deborah. "But because of the course you are taking, the honor will not be yours, for the Lord will deliver Sisera into the hands of a woman." Deborah is displeased. Deborah is displeased at the reluctant Barak. The one who is commissioned drags his feet. So now she says the honor, the prize of war, will fall into the hands of a woman. Well, the only woman we know in the story so far is Deborah, so we wonder if Deborah is going to be our warrior judge after all. So Deborah went with Barak to Kadesh. And there Barak summoned Zebulun and Naphtali, and 10,000 men went up under his command, and Deborah also went up with him. Barak has gone up north to his tribes, and there Barak has gone up north to his tribal territory and its neighbors, and between him and Deborah, they have managed to muster a fighting force. Now, while this is happening up in the north, the story tells us about a certain Heber the Kenite. Now, Heber the Kenite had left the other Kenites, the descendants of Hobab, brother-in-law of Moses, and pitched his tent by the great tree in Zananim near Kadesh. Heber the Kenite. Now, the Kenites we know are related by marriage to Moses. They are the family of Moses' wife, Zipporah, and the family of Moses' father-in-law, Jethro. Why are we being told about this man at this point? We don't know, except that archaeology tells us that the Kenites were excellent metalsmiths. Could it be that Heber, being a metalsmith, has contracted an AMC, an annual maintenance contract, with the Canaanite army to render services to their chariots? And is that why he has separated out from the rest of the Kenites and moved a little further north and pitched his tent, made his dwelling close to where the Canaanite army possibly is? We don't know, but as we go on with the story, the Hebrew narrator might come back to this detail. Let's wait and see. When they told Sisera that Barak son of Abinoam had gone up to Mount Tabor, Sisera summoned from Harosheth Hagoyim to the Kishon River all his men and his 900 chariots fitted with iron. Sisera is now told that the Israelites are gathering for war. And with this information, Sisera swings into battle mode. And now he brings together his army, 900 chariots fitted with iron, a force that the Israelites cannot match. And so we must imagine these two armies positioned around Mount Tabor. At the top of the mountain, having chosen a very strategic place really, is Barak, Deborah by his side, and his army. And down at the bottom of the mountain, in the valley of the Kishon River, is Sisera. Now, we should understand that in Israel, which is a rather dry country, river valleys often run dry. They run dry in the period between the two rains, between the spring rains and the winter rains. It's only when the rains come that the river valleys fill up. And so in this dry river valley is Sisera with his army, his 900 chariots. And then it is Deborah who gives the signal to Barak to launch the attack. Deborah said to Barak, "Go. This is the day the Lord has given Sisera into your hands. Has not the Lord gone ahead of you?" With this, we wonder if Deborah is now giving Barak a second chance to win the prize of war. Will Barak prove to be the warrior judge after all? At Deborah's command, Barak went down Mount Tabor with 10,000 men following him. And at Barak's advance, the Lord routed Sisera and all his chariots and army by the sword. And Sisera got down from his chariot and fled on foot. The poem which follows tells us that the Lord sent down a heavy, unseasonal rain, a great downpour which resulted in the river valleys flooding with torrents of water, raging, gushing torrents of water, at which the chariots of Sisera became his disadvantage. The chariots, which were the army's strength, suddenly turn into the army's weakness. Imagine them standing there with the swirling waters rising higher and higher around them, and the wheels, those wheels fitted so marvelously with iron, those wheels getting bogged down into the mud. What use were Sisera's 900 chariots of iron? Sisera got down from his chariot, and brave man that he was, he fled on foot. Meanwhile, Barak pursued the chariots and army as far as Haroshet Hagoyim, and all Sisera's troops fell by the sword. Not a man was left. Barak keeps his eyes on the retreating army, the chariots that still are capable of escaping and retreating back to base. Barak assumes that Sisera the captain is leading that retreat. He has his eyes set in the wrong direction. He hasn't noticed, poor Barak, that Sisera meanwhile has escaped. Sisera fled on foot to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite. There's the Heber. Sisera meanwhile fled on foot to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite. And now we understand why. Because there was an alliance between Jabin, king of Hazor, and the family of Heber the Kenite. Our guess was right after all. Heber the Kenite does have an annual maintenance contract with the Canaanite king. Sisera, knowing that this alliance gives him the safety he requires at this point, arrives at the house of Heber. Jael went out to meet Sisera. Jael seems to be waiting for Sisera. She has probably heard of the outcome of the battle, of how, very unexpectedly, the Canaanite army has been routed by the ragtag army of Deborah and Barak, and she goes out to meet him. It was a practice in these times that when a conquering hero returned from war, the women of the city, and definitely the woman of the house, would go out to meet him. But Jael's going out is ironic here because Sisera is no war hero. If anything, he is a thoroughly disgraced commander. But she goes out to meet him and see what she says. "Come, my lord," she says. "Come right in. Don't be afraid." And so he entered her tent and she covered him with a blanket. "I'm thirsty," he said. "Please give me some water." She opened a skin of milk, gave him a drink, and covered him up. Here is a third protagonist in the story. We had Deborah, we had Barak, and now we have an unexpected entry. Jael is not an Israelite, at least not an Israelite proper. She is a Kenite. But notice how she has the upper hand in this situation right from the start. She is the one who speaks, she is the one who acts. Sisera, meanwhile, is simply acted upon. He does whatever Jael is asking him to do. And even when he opens his mouth, he is in a dependent position. Please give me some water, asks this battle-weary Sisera. Please give me some water, he asks. And instead of water, she gives him milk. Now, in these places, it probably was goat's milk rather than cow's milk. Now, we all know that milk tends to make one sleep better. Soporific, it's called. Goat's milk is supposed to be even more sleep-inducing than cow's milk is. And soon we're going to find out that she dopes him with milk to dupe him. Let's see what happens next. Sisera speaks. Stand in the doorway of the tent, he told her. If someone comes by and asks you, is there anyone there? Say, no. Even as he drops off into sleep, lying there under that goat's hair blanket that Jael covers him with, Sisera ensures that he is safe. He orders Jael to make sure that no one finds him. So battle-weary, so exhausted, so tired is this man that when he speaks, he even uses the wrong gender. That doesn't come through in English, but it does in the Hebrew. In the Hebrew, the verb is conjugated in such a way that you can make out the gender. Like you would say in Kannada, nintkolo, if you were saying stand to a man. So tired is Sisera that by default he slips into addressing a male as he would in the army, wouldn't he? And so he falls into sleep. But Jael, Heber's wife, picked up a tent peg and a hammer and went quietly to him while he lay fast asleep, exhausted. She drove the peg through his temple into the ground, and he died. Jael does exactly the opposite of what she's asked to do. Instead of protecting his life, she takes it, and she takes it daringly, with weapons that are thoroughly unconventional. A tent peg. If you've been in the scouts or guides, you know what a tent peg would be. A long metal nail, say about a foot long. The bigger the tent, the longer and stronger the peg. A peg in her left hand and a hammer in her right. Here is a woman who is a metalsmith's wife. These are implements that she knows how to handle. Perhaps she works with them every day. And so taking up these, she goes quietly to him and drives the peg through him. Now remember, she has only one chance, one strong stroke with which to do this. If she fails, the man is going to wake up and object, isn't he? She drives the peg through some part of his head, we are not sure which, though the English renders that as temple. It's probably the area just under his jaw, the soft part where the jugular vein runs, and one strong strike at this point will kill him. In fact, so strong is the blow that the peg penetrates through his neck and right down into the ground. Pinned into the ground, he dies before he even knows how he died. And with that, the prize of war does pass into the hands of a woman. Not into the hand of Deborah, but into the hands of a totally unlikely candidate, Jael, a non-Israelite, a non-soldier, and even a woman. Just then, Barak came by in pursuit of Sisera, and Jael went out to meet him. "Come," she said, "I will show you the man you're looking for." Can you imagine Barak suddenly feeling hopeful? Maybe now is his chance to win the prize of war. So he went in with her, and there lay Sisera, already dead, with the tent peg through his temple. And Barak knows that he didn't really win the war. The prize has slipped through his hands. Who is the judge in this story? Is it Deborah? Well, yes, in a way. She did perform some of the duties, responsibilities, or tasks that a judge would do. She is the one who helps to muster the forces. She is the one who strategizes the war, and it is at her word that the war begins. She is the one, most importantly, who hears the word of God and then acts upon it. Could the judge be Barak? Well, yes and no. Barak does lead the war, and in that sense, he is your regular warrior judge. But he is not the one who finally brings the war to a resounding conclusion by killing the commander of the enemy forces. That's not Barak at all. In fact, it appears that Barak plays second fiddle right through. He plays second fiddle to the two women in this story. He takes orders from Deborah, and to Jael he loses the spoils of war. And to Jael he loses the prize of war. Just as Sisera is subject to Jabin, king of the Canaanites, so Barak is subject to these two women in the story. Barak is not really the judge in the story. Is Jael the judge? Perhaps. In fact, she resembles the previous judge, Ehud, in the manner of the assassination. Both of them, Ehud and Jael, assassinate their enemy in a private room when they are alone with the person that they assassinate. The Hebrew verb in both cases is the same, the verb that is used to describe how the weapon enters the body of the enemy. The thrusting or the piercing that the weapon performs is the same in both cases. In the case of Ehud, the assassination is by an unexpected hand, the left hand. In the case of Jael, the hand is just as unexpected. It is a foreign hand, the hand of a non-Israelite, a Kenite, and a Kenite woman at that. Why does Jael behave the way she does? Why does she risk not simply the family's economic gains in this treaty with the Canaanites, but also risk the very existence of the family by this assassination? What is her motivation? What drives her to do something so drastic? We don't know because the narrator doesn't tell us. The closest to Jael that we know of is Rahab, another woman who makes a daring, courageous, and a highly risky choice simply because she wants to align herself with the right party, with the God of Israel. So who is the true judge here? Or who fits best the post of judge? Is it Deborah? Is it Barak? Is it Jael? Well, each of them, to some degree, seem to be the judge. On that day, God subdued Jabin, king of Canaan, before the Israelites, and the hand of the Israelites pressed harder and harder against Jabin, king of Canaan, until they destroyed him. And with that, the second cycle of the hero stories of the book of Judges comes to an end. What is your takeaway from the story? Take a break, think about it, and come back. I can think of at least 2 takeaways from this story. 1. If you don't do the job, someone else will. Because Barak is reluctant, God moves the honor onto someone else. And this someone else is Jael. Jael picks up the prize that should have gone into the hands of Barak. Twice Barak has the chance. Twice he is given the opportunity to seize this prize, and still he lets it go. If you don't do the job, God has a plan B. God has someone else that will rise up and take your place. Don't miss the opportunity. Takeaway 2. God works with human beings. He collaborates and cooperates with them to make his plans fulfill themselves. God works with human beings, cooperating with them and collaborating with them to bring his plans to fulfillment. Often, God works with teams. In the previous story, he worked with Ehud, and in stories after this, he will work with single people. But in this particular story, the paradigm, the model is of God working with a team. Each one contributes something to the deliverance of Israel, whether it is Deborah, or whether it is Barak, or whether it is Jael. Each one plays their role. They perform their parts, and together the job gets done. Doing something all by yourself may not be the only way to get it done. There might be an even better way, and that is to get together a team, a group of like-minded people who can all pool together their strengths so that the job gets done. Next time, we're going to be looking at the story of Gideon. This is a story you've heard in Sunday school, but it's possible that you've heard only half the story. There might be a whole half waiting that you know nothing about. Come back and we'll see. For now, goodbye.